From TPN at Technophilespodcast.com, for Jamon Stark, I'm David Geisler, and this is the Tabletop Test Shop.
I'm thinking to all of like the MMOs I've played, for example, and
True.
I'm wondering if the other heroes have these different makeups, if we had thought about, well, what would make a good party, like you would in an MMO.
On this episode, the cast invites Krista-Lee Malone to join them in a game of Sentinels of the Multiverse. Will they build a perfect team of superheroes or will they perish? Let's find out, because this is Tabletop Test Shop's very first episode.
Hi, I'm Jamon. Welcome to the Tabletop Test Shop. I would like to introduce my two lovely co-hosts, Eli and Dylan, and our wonderful guest for today, Krista-Lee. Eli, so let's begin over there across the end of the table from myself. So how have you been? How's your week been?
Pretty good, yeah.
Anything special or interesting going on? Special projects you've been working on?
No. To be quite honest. My life is pretty, straightforward.
Kind of like mine. Just
hanging out.
All right, cool. How about you over there, Dylan? How you been?
Cold. Been cold. No, it's been good. Other than winter. Actually, I just got back from Florida, so that's why I'm cold. So I've been living the dream and happy and sad both at the same time to be back in Wisconsin. So there you are.
Yeah, I feel you. Did you bring any of that warm weather back up with you?
No. Left it all there. Dang. I knew I forgot to pack something.
So, Krista-Lee, now you are actually part of the Technophiles podcast.
Yes.
As well as you have a project of your own that you're going to be working on. Could you tell us a little bit about the new project that you've got coming up?
So the new project is also with the TPN network, which is obviously where we are now. It's called Sci-Fi Science. Okay. The first episode will come out next month. Mm-hmm. So probably, it's going to be a few weeks after this airs, I'm sure. But we're basically going to be looking at the science behind various science fiction books. Basically. It's pretty straightforward. The title, right? Science fiction, science.
Not that I want to give away any of your episodes or anything, but do you have an example of like maybe a first or second episode, like generally what it's going to be?
Well, I don't know how to answer that without spoilers. If you're looking for an example of like format,
like a general example of how you're going to be examinating these different things.
Okay. So let me give you an example that we're not going to use, right? Perfect. So let's just say we were reading let's say The Matrix.
Yeah.
So part of the discussion is going to be, well, is there any way it would be possible that we could actually plug a computer into the back of the brain without killing you and learn stuff? And, what research would you fund in order to get this done? Like, how realistic is
that sounds really cool. So would you go into, the neuroscience of it and sort of divulge into that, or?
We would. If that was the story we were talking about, then we would. Now, of course, with science fiction varies all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes what we're going to be looking at is neuroscience. Sometimes it's going to be chemistry, engineering. It's all going to depend on the story. So we're going to be really kind of jumping across the sciences depending on what book we are covering.
That sounds really cool. I like that idea. And you said that's going to be about approximately 2 weeks after this episode?
Something like this. I don't actually remember when this is airing.
We'll put something somewhere up here
that
shows exactly when it's airing for anyone that might be interested in that.
Well, Sci-Fi Science is going to be on a different schedule, right? Because we're only doing it once a month.
Oh, it's once a month. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Because, I got a whole book to read.
That's fair. All right. So today in the test shop, we are going to be looking at the game Sentinels of the Multiverse. Now, Sentinels of the Multiverse is a cooperative game where each player has a variety of different decks, such as this, that represent their hero, and we're all fighting against a singular villain to try to take down that villain and save the day. The rules of Sentinels of the Multiverse are very simple. The entirety of the game is made up of 3 different types of decks. You have your villain deck, your hero deck, and your environment deck. Now, in the very beginning of play, all the players are going to choose a villain that they're going to be going against, and then each player, in turn, is going to choose one of the heroes. And finally, they're going to choose an environment that's going to alter play overall. For both the hero and the villain, you have extremely similar cards. You will notice that in the upper right-hand corner of the villain deck, you have a 40. That represents its hit points. And the issue number listed on the hero card right here is the number of hit points that a hero has. Underneath on the hero card, you have its power. But for the villain, you'll actually have a very special card that shows all the in-play rules, including setup. Play works as follows. First of all, the villain takes its turn, in which case it will draw one of its own cards. This is an example of one of the villain cards, and it shows both in the very top, if it's a minion of some sort, a number of hit points it has before it's removed from the board, and as well as here in the text, what each of the different minions or cards will do. You follow that card. At the very end, all cards play through that happen to remain on the board. Play then continues to each of the heroes, who in turn will have an opportunity to play one particular card, and then afterwards have the opportunity to play any power that they have. Each hero begins with one power naturally, but then with cards can also get an additional power. Play continues after all the heroes have gone with an environment card. These are the cards that alter playing field. They can do damage. They might buff a player, usually not. In most cases, there's something harmful that you'll want to remove or stop. And then play just continues between these different decks until either the hero has lost all of its hit points, marked by wonderful markers that they give you, or the heroes, all of them, are go unconscious, as displayed by the other side. Keeping in mind that as heroes fall, the other heroes become stronger. And it shows on the back here powers that the other heroes get when the other friends of theirs fall. And that is the simple way in which Sentinels of the Multiverse is played. So now that we've gotten most of the rules out of the way and we have a general understanding of the game, the first thing I'd like to discuss with our audience is how exactly this show is going to be working. We decided we didn't want to be about playing the game, but you will be seeing snippets of us play here and there. We're more about a discussion of the game, but we also don't want to be a complete review. What we want to discuss more is how it felt playing, and most especially how it felt strategizing within the game. Because I think it's very important for anyone who's coming into a game new and is interested in it, not only to just have a general review, but more so how it feels in more emotional level as well as a strategic and reasoned level. So our discussion that we're going to be having today is more going to be along those terms. And we're going to begin the discussion off with discussing, first of all, how it felt when we were first coming in. Impressions as far as just as the rules were being read, the setup. And we're going to go with the person who was our first player for the game and playing who?
I played Raw.
And she spoke like that for the entirety of the game.
I felt like that is the voice of Ra. That is how the sun god would sound.
like he needs a lozenge.
Yes. Well, because his throat's going to be on fire, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
Point.
So
Yeah.
going into this game, did you feel comfortable with the way the rules laid things out and the setup? Did you feel like it was pretty explanatory, or how exactly did you feel going in?
I think they're as explanatory as they can be. This is one of those games which I feel almost all card games are, because each card is unique. There's really only so much you can explain in the rules, because you have to go through and, like, if I play this card, read what it says. And it's not hard, because it's just going to tell you this is what this card does, and so you play it, so it's fine. But that type of game also, before you start playing and you're actually looking at the rules, a lot of the rules don't really fully make sense, because if a rule says, oh, when you play this type of card, it's beneficial or not beneficial, you don't even understand what that type of card is.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying? So
no, that's very true.
It's definitely a you learn as you play type game.
And just to jump on, Dylan, did you feel like those cards really explained itself well as we were going through, or do you feel like we kind of had to jump to the rules a lot for them?
Well, I don't think that we had to jump to the rules too often necessarily. I guess I'll agree with Krista-Lee that when you're reading the cards, they don't necessarily make sense all the time, and so you're wondering what the implication of what is written down on the card is, kind of. You know what I mean?
And do you guys think that's just indicative of these kind of games, or do you think it's the way this particular game was set up and created?
I think that it's, well, card games in general. However, if the rule set had been a little bit more I guess, had been longer, maybe it would have been more explanatory. But at the same time, part of the way you play these games is you just play them, you figure it out. That's kind of how these
So there's
go.
really nothing probably the rules could have done to alleviate that at that point.
Think so.
Okay. So what about you, Eli? What did you think kind of going in as far as the setup? We were basically sitting on the rules the entire time and kind of working through that. Was it an easy setup, you think? Or?
Yeah, I think it was a really easy setup.
By the way, I just want to say, I love the fact that they have these little tokens. I know they were sitting there when we explained the rules, but the fact that there's these like tokens that everyone has to remember bonuses they have or negatives against them or anything. I mean, I know we haven't gotten into that, but I thought that was a really awesome kind of addition to the whole thing in the setup. But
yeah.
All right, so Eli. So when we first started playing the game, sorry, I know that was a random thought, but okay. I just,
a little tangent. That's fine.
But so now going into the beginning of the game and when we first started playing it, I know it was sort of passing through, but how do you feel like the turns played through? Do you think that they were, because I know it starts with villain, right? Then it moves on to each of the players, and then it moves on to the environment.
Yes.
Do you feel as though that process of going through, do you think that it was fair and something you could strategize by? And also, do you think it flowed well?
Yeah, I feel like it flowed well. And I think, it's a good choice to have the villain go first, because then he has certain like minions and stuff that come into play that you have to destroy. So going into your turn, like if you want to try to attack the villain or the little minion he has out. So I guess you can strategize each turn that way. You can't really. I know you had mentioned it. Like you can't strategize throughout the whole game, the entire game.
Right.
More just turn by turn basis, depending on what cards are drawn.
So in this game, though, because of the way that it's set up, because normally a game has like the early phases, mid, and end game strategies. So I guess that kind of has to alter a little bit of our conversation here. Because, I don't feel as though... Do you feel as though there was that separation of strategies, or do you think it was just a turn-by-turn?
It was mostly a turn-by-turn. But with this, I don't know about any of the other villains, but with this villain, he had... where you got him down to 0 health, and then you flipped over, and he had a totally different power, and it kind of changed the game that way. So there was still a little bit of an end game in terms of this villain.
Of the changes over.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. So now, as far as you go, Krista-Lee, so going into this, and especially in the first turns, let's talk about the clarity of the cards, because I mean, since you talked about how each card as it's written is what makes it important, you have to learn each as you go. As we were playing the game, did you feel as though the cards were written in such a way to make it flow for you and make that easy, or do you feel like it was the way that it was written made it difficult or anything like that? Do you think there were any issues as far as that's concerned?
Not major ones. Of course, whoever wrote these has a particular voice. And I think after 2 or 3 cards, that's obvious. But for example, like Eli had that one card, and now I don't remember what it was, but whatever that card was, remember when we're like, well, does that apply to just her or everybody?
The environment.
Yeah, the environment.
Right. Now, like within a couple of cards, we all understood that it meant everybody because we noticed other cards would say specific to only that hero, right? Now, when she first plays it, it's not obvious, but it very quickly becomes obvious. So I don't think that's major. That just has to do with voice. And then once you have the voice, you understand the card and it's fine.
So by probably by the halfway point, I don't think we were even referring to anything anymore, were we?
I would say not even that long. I would say before, like with a quarter into the game.
Yeah, definitely. Now,
once you just 2 or 3 cards down, you're done.
So let's actually really quick. I have been holding off on asking whether or not anyone liked it on purpose. We'll get to that. But what I want to do is I want to talk specifically about each of the sort of the races that we played and what we thought of them and how they applied to the game as a whole. To sort of, do we feel like they were all very generic, or do we feel like they each had their own sort of special power set that differentiated them? So why don't we begin with you, Dylan?
Okay. I had the Tempest, Cthulhu Light, as we like to call him. It's got a little octopus-looking head, I guess. And I guess I didn't really understand how he was played at first. I didn't understand that his wave attack damaged all enemies, if you will. I misread the card. it makes kind of sense. So he's like an area of effect type damage person versus a single target. And so I guess that was his advantage in comparison to everybody else. So, and then he had some defensive buffs as well, which was nice. So he had his own little thing, and I feel like he was different from everybody else. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So that was his setup. Now, how is the Wraith? That's one you played, right?
Yep, the Wraith. She has more of a stealth setup.
Okay.
So her special power, the next hit that she would get would be reduced by 2 hit points. And she had some other cards in her deck that was similar to that, where it would reduce the damage that would otherwise be affected on certain heroes and such. So she definitely had that stealth type of character. So I think she had her own little special thing going on.
So I played Legacy, who has that very Superman-esque like stature and hair, even, except it's more blonde. And Legacy, I felt like he was, I mean, like I barely did damage with him, but mine was all about boosting everyone else and like trying to do that. So in that way, I felt like he was a little bit different. But then Ra.
So Ra is basically a fire mage.
Yeah.
The iconography is pretty typical Egyptian, like you would see in any movie, comic book that portrays ancient Egypt. And I played it exactly like a fire mage from like Final Fantasy XI, Pathfinder, D&D. I mean, that's that same type.
Now, I think it's best if we explain to everyone that there are different difficulties, both of the villain and of the heroes. And we played all level 1 difficulty heroes. We played against Baron Blade, who is a pretty generic, mad scientist kind of one. And he was also difficulty 1. And I say this because I'm about to tell you what I thought of the game. And I think it's important to know that before I say. I'm not saying I didn't like it, but I really didn't get too invested in it. I kind of felt like the strategy was a little too light, but I think that might be because of the fact that we each played level 1 for characters and level 1 for our villain, because I kind of felt like I was doing different things, but everyone else was simply just dealing damage, and that was about it. Yeah. So Eli, would you agree? Or
yeah, I definitely would agree with that. Because it was on the easy level, I guess you would say, it was just mostly just trying to hit the villain with hit
Did
points.
You enjoy the game overall?
Yeah, I know I enjoyed it, but I agree with you where there wasn't as much depth to it as there could have been if we played the more advanced
and the problem is we don't know that for sure,
right?
Whether or not the more advanced ones are.
But we did read the advanced part of the villain's card, and we did realize it would have made it a little more difficult.
We would have died.
Well, it would have made...
Yeah, we really would have.
Flat out, we would have died.
It would have made the first half of the game much more pressing. It would have, it would have just changed your... Well, I don't know that we could have done any more damage to him, but it would have made it much... You really needed to get to the second part of the game with this guy, especially with the advanced rule set. So.
Yeah.
And I know I had a lot of cards in my hand that I never used because I didn't feel like I could, because all we were trying to do is just hit him with damage points, whereas like I feel like the other cards would be better for like strategizing in other ways, and would have been more fun to play those and see how those would have played out in terms of the game. But
yeah. And Krista-Lee, did you enjoy the game?
I did enjoy the game, but I also think that this falls under... Actually, hold on. I'm going to rephrase that. Most games that I play, these types of games, I will find them okay the first time because you're learning it, you're playing easy mode, blah, 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 and then you decide, right, I'm going to play this again or not, and that's when you actually enjoy it. And I think this is one of those games. I can look at the cards, I look at the mechanics, and now that I understand them from playing it once, I feel like I would really enjoy this game the second time.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And actually, we're going to take a quick break for a brief moment, and when we come back, how about we discuss more in detail sort of how our game went through and how it played out. Especially, like you said, there was a big shift in how everything went. And so when we come right back, we're going to be talking about that big shift. Welcome back to the Test Shop. I'm Jamon, your host, and joined with me still are Eli, Dylan, and Krista-Lee, and we're continuing our conversation about the Sentinels of the Multiverse. Now, to move things forward, we're going to discuss a little bit about how the villain works. Now, you saw in the rule set regarding the cards and just generally what they are. But the villain that we played was this guy named Baron Blade. I'll hold it up right here. Baron Blade actually was kind of... I hated him. Because in the first stage, he began doing... What was it again? Oh, we had 15 cards before he would destroy the Earth with a moon. In the second phase, after you do damage to him a certain amount, he would actually flip over and do another amount of damage. At this point, he just did continuous damage against us. So, first stage of the game, we were pretty much... I mean, Dylan, we were pretty much just like racing against the clock, right?
Right, yep.
And so now how did that shift in the second phase? Like as far as strategies, as far as how it was that you were thinking of the game? Did it change or were we pretty much playing the same manner?
Well, because we were mostly dealing damage. Now, I'll switch to the advanced rule set in my mind for just a quick second. We were killing his minions off first because his minions were constantly doing damage. However, if we had less time to kill him because they were adding more and more cards, because once you got to 15 discarded cards, it would have been game over right away.
And that game cheated. Because it says 15 cards, and then there's cards that come out and say, do damage, and then add
pick another card. Yeah. But it would be... With more cards coming out more quickly, you would maybe say, okay, I can take this damage. I don't care about this minion. Just go for this guy. That would be the change in strategy that you would have from the first half to the second half with the advanced rule set. Now, given that we were all just damage dealers anyway, it didn't come into play here. But that's
you guys were damage dealers.
Yeah, well, yeah, but you were buffing us, so we were.
True.
Yeah, exactly, and you didn't really have an option. So
yeah, well. I mean, it was great. I got to sort of play. I almost felt more like a priest character than like the Sentinel Superman kind of thing. But that's cool.
I know.
But so in going into that, now you were more of a multi-damage dealer. Mm-hmm. You were more of the full damage. Like that's almost everything that you did. And of course we had Eli who had more stealth type cards.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, do you really feel like because you were stealthy, that was it differentiated and shown in the way the cards were played out, or did you feel more like you were just like raw?
I felt probably more like raw in terms, like she's supposed to be a stealth character, but the way we were playing it, I felt more like I just had to keep damaging him.
Now, I never saw you guys as hands, so it could very well have been that you were just playing the damage dealing, and it could be because with Baron Blade, it's almost like the clock, right? Yeah. So we have to do damage. Did you have other cards in your hand that could have been used more towards a stealthy approach?
Yeah, I did. I'm trying to remember which ones they were, but I definitely had a lot of other cards in my hand that I didn't feel like would be...
You got a few right in front of you. See if there's any that like stand out. And we should each do the same, actually, really quick. I will point out, like, this was my favorite, the Inspiring Presence, for me, which is basically I increase everyone's damage and also heal everyone, which is very indicative of how I felt like my character was, like constantly throughout. And so for you, as far as other cards, was there anything that with a different person you think it might have used?
Yeah, so definitely I actually had two cards in my hand pretty much the whole time that, were more like stealth cards, but I never felt like they would be useful for how we were playing the game at the time. But there's one called the Infrared Eyepiece. It would reveal the top two cards of the villain deck, put one of them on the top of the villain deck and the other on the bottom, and then draw a card. So, you can see ahead of time, like, what could be coming with the villain and, try to strategize that way. And I had two of those, and I never really used those because I didn't think it would really be helpful at the time because we were just trying to hit them so many times. There's another one called Smoke Bombs. So that one is just pretty much redirecting damage points to other people,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if the damage is going to someone with low HP points, then you could redirect it to someone with high HP points.
So what about you, Dylan? Anything that like stood out that maybe was underutilized but kind of stood out for your character?
So, and I have one card, and I don't know really quite when I would use this. It was I could discard up to 3 cards, and I would deal one damage per card discarded. But having cards is really kind of important in the game.
Yeah, especially when there's stuff that like removes your hand, so that we almost got down to the point, like there was one card that was an environment card that I remember that would have kept taking them away from us. We could have been down to one card. So I guess in that case, maybe that would work out.
I guess I don't. So this card is still kind of a question mark to me. Like when would I use it? But 3 damage isn't exactly like destroying the world either. So I feel like maybe underpowered, or maybe I just am not understanding.
It could be. So. And then for Raw, one that sort of stands out to you, and also a favorite card, Krista-Lee. What was your what would you say is your favorite that stood out?
So I don't know the answer to your second question, so I'll think about that while I answer the first one.
Perfect.
All right. So this Ra is DPS because he is a fire mage. So the way I played Ra is the only way, or is clearly the way he was designed to be played. Mm-hmm. Now there were, however, things that were context dependent, right? So I would have this one here where it says Ra deals each non-hero target X fire damage, where X equals the number of environment cards in play. So I think I had like 2 or 3 cards like this where it would say blah blah X damage based on however many villain cards, environment cards, whatever. And yet every time it came to my turn, it would be something like, oh, there's 1 environment card out. Or there's only 1 villain in the trash pile. And so then it seems like it's a waste when I can play these other cards, again, being DPS, where it goes, oh, Ra, for no reason, hits him for 3 points of damage.
Yeah, and there's no reason for us to want to keep environment cards on there because they all just like kept beating on us or taking cards. So there's no way to stack that up for you.
Right. So I think... But with a different villain, a different party makeup, that might have been different.
And keep in mind, and everything that we're saying here, this is all like based upon the single play. And we're not saying it's a bad game, but I think it's one of those that definitely as you play different villains or different things, it could change the game or how it's played. And I think it has a lot of potential for that. And I've sort of peeked at a few of the other villains, and there's a few things that are more interesting. And I like the sort of advanced stuff so that it makes it a little... But even so, everything is really reliant upon just doing as much damage as you can, which I guess is just... That's card games and most games in general, but...
I wonder, did you look at the other heroes? And the reason I asked is because of this. So especially with this card where it is so obvious, classic mage DPS... And then you have the stealth character, you have that character. I'm thinking to all of like the MMOs I've played, for example, and I'm wondering if the other heroes have these different makeups, if we had thought about, well, what would make a good party, like you would in an MMO, would that have made for a more interesting game?
There's one called Bunker, who's actually on the cover of the box. He's like in a giant suit of armor. And I had looked through him, but he's like a level 2 or 3 for difficulty. But he's like a tank, where his whole thing is he draws damage towards himself and has tons of hit points and damage reduction. So I think you're right. Maybe you can create like you're the fire mage, he's the tank who goes in front of it. You have someone who's like Legacy, who's sort of buffing everybody like a cleric in a way. And I could definitely see the analogy to that in that regard. So, and Dylan, Eli, any thoughts in that regard?
No, I totally agree with that. I think it would, I mean, if we would have known the heroes better, we could have, obviously this, this is the first time, I think all of us would play in it, right?
Yeah.
So we didn't know very much about the heroes. But if we knew more, I feel like could have picked heroes to,
Well, we will be playing this game again this coming Friday. And we'll be playing it actually on the TPN Twitch stream. We'll basically put a link right down below in the description. And if you want to come join us on Friday, we'll be starting at about what time? 7 o'clock? I believe we had set.
Yeah.
And we're Central Standard Time, just so you know, because we're all in Wisconsin. And so we'll be playing then, and we'll be trying it one more time. And we'll probably play on a much higher difficulty.
I think so. One thing we didn't talk about is the environment, because there's a bunch of different environments we could have done as well.
Oh, that's true. Switching environments, like we did Atlantis, and then there was...
Yeah, so the Atlantis seemed like it was trying to deal damage to us. Some of them might have acted differently as well, So that's a whole...
Do you think there might have been ones that boost rather than harm?
Well, not necessarily boost, but maybe have different, because we always just had the one single environment card out, it seemed like, and, in a different game, they might have stacked up, you had 3 or 4 active effects
which
going
would have
at
then had Ra be more effective in that regard.
So that's something else I just thought about is, we only had this one
one test with the environment. So next time we play, we got to do different environment, more difficult boss, and more difficult characters.
Yeah, and even maybe the advanced.
I say for our next one, we go all out. We go highest difficulty characters, and we really put this to the test. And we see we've done our first game. That's really just a sort of put our foot in the water.
Yeah.
Let's really push this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. But before we move on, I did want to just ask, how does this relate to other games that you've played? Like, how do you kind of see it as one of your better games? Want to kind of you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we start with our guest, Krista-Lee?
All right. I would say the game is kind of in the middle.
Okay.
But with that being said, I will say that I think it's very difficult to make good cooperative games.
This is very true.
So even though I would say if I compare this to all games, I'm putting it kind of in the middle, but if I compared it just to other cooperative games, it would be much higher. And this isn't even because I don't like cooperative games, because I actually really do. For example, my favorite cooperative game is Pandemic. And that one is just, that's what made me fall in love with cooperative games. But I do want to make it clear that I'm not saying this game is bad. It's not. It's a very enjoyable game. I would play this again. I would buy this for someone for Christmas. Yeah. It's not the best, but it's good. It's decent.
Dylan?
Yeah, I guess I'll agree with that. Cooperative games, when you're not playing against another human being, you have an issue with sort of, balancing that is kind of hard to do, I think, to some degree. I guess this isn't really my wheelhouse of games that I would choose to play, but in a group of people that a more casual game playing group of people, this would work well. I'd be interested to see how it works out with the advanced gameplay, but I guess I like more in-depth games, and I find this is maybe a little bit more lacking in depth to my preferences. So I'm going to put it a little bit lower on my list of games.
Eli?
Yeah. For me, I honestly haven't really played that many cooperative games, so I don't really know how to compare it to other. I've played Pandemic, which I really enjoyed Pandemic, but otherwise I haven't really done much with cooperative in terms of not having another human that you're against. It's just a separate thing. But I guess.
Do you think it suffered from not having because games that are cooperative, House on the Hill, you have Battlestar Galactica, where you have an enemy at some point.
Right. Then I think that's better. More enjoyable for me. So I guess this would be in the middle for me as well, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with all of you. I'm probably a little bit higher than you guys are because I love cooperative games. That is my wheelhouse.
Okay.
But I really love cooperative games that do have an actual person being the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like this would have been an amazing game if the villain was a person.
Yeah.
Because where they can strategize and work against each other, I think that would have made this amazing. But otherwise, right now, it's just good. Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if this is being colored by the fact that we played it on easy mode. Because here's the thing. Because when you think about if the villain was a person and they would strategize, the subtext there is that it would be harder. If you have a person who's strategizing, it would be harder. And I'm thinking that might have even colored my interpretation of this being kind of middle of the road, is because this was very easy. It wasn't, we played all these level 1s and that was fine. We learned it, but you're right. There was no engagement. I didn't really feel like I cared. But when I've played other cooperative games, I wanted to get to that point where it's like, oh my God, we need to talk about this. If I deal damage, can you heal me later? And blah, 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 blah. And then, that's what you need. And I don't feel like we know if this game offers that.
Yeah, I kind of felt like when we got to the second part, it was almost over.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
actually, there was a point where I literally said, all right, we can all do damage. This game is done. And we just played out the turn, but it really did feel like, all right, we're just playing out the turn now. We finished. It didn't feel climactic.
Yeah. There wasn't a lot of table talk, like you said, either. Oh my gosh, so let's all plan this out together type of thing.
But I wonder if that's because we're new. Yeah. So it's almost like we're all still learning. So it reduces some of that discussion.
We didn't need to.
Yeah, that's true.
There was no
really didn't have to.
As I looked at my hand, I knew that whatever I played, it did not matter.
Yeah.
In regards to what everybody else was
playing. You know what? On Friday, we're going to try it out on hard mode. We're going to super push this, and we'll see if that changes.
Yeah.
And maybe, and Krista-Lee, will you be able to join us for that?
I don't know. Let me check.
Well, hopefully, Krista-Lee, you'll be able to join us. That way we can maybe play the game again and continue this discussion with a harder difficulty and see where things go. So, everyone in agreement with that?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. Well, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us for this portion of the conversation. Like I said, we're going to be playing this again on Twitch. That way you can watch the entirety of the playthrough. This, of course, was our sort of overall first playthrough discussion. I think you kind of figured out where we stand with everything, but feel free to watch us on Friday and make an opinion of your own. We hope to see you then. Bye, everyone.